Distinguished Distinguished delegates, please take your seats, please. I'll start. Okay. Dear colleagues, distinguished delegates, very good morning. I hope you all had a pleasant rest day. I also hope that you have come with renewed energy and enthusiasm, as we have much work ahead of us and an ambitious agenda for today, tomorrow, Tuesday, and Wednesday. For our meeting today, we will consider the following. First, agenda item 9, assessment and review of the effectiveness of the Nagoya Protocol. Second, under agenda item 11, we will consider the review of the programs of the work of the convention. Third, under agenda item 12, we will conduct our first reading on the multi-year program of work of the Conference of the Parties. Fourth, under agenda item 13, we will consider administrative and budgetary matters. Delegates, please note that I will take up items 11 and 12 together. Given the close relationship between these two matters and the need to be efficient with the time we have at our disposal. Let us now turn to our first agenda item 9 on assessment and review of the effectiveness of the Nagoya Protocol under Article 31. I will now ask the Secretariat to introduce the document. Secretariat, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Pursuant to Article 31 of the Nagoya Protocol, the meaning of the parties to the Nagoya Protocol in its decision NP 3/1 decided to conduct the second assessment and review of the effectiveness of the protocol at its 6th meeting in 2026. In Section B of the same decision, the COP-MOP requested the Executive Secretary to propose a methodology for conducting the second assessment and review of the effectiveness of the protocol, taking into account the outcomes and lessons learned from the first assessment and review process, experiences from the assessment and review under the Cartagena Protocol and the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and submit it for consideration to the subsidiary body on implementation. Document CBD-SBI-04/12 before you responds to this request. The proposed elements and sources of information for the second assessment and review are provided in the table in the annex to the proposed recommendation. This table has been updated from the elements and sources of information used in the first assessment and includes additional elements as requested by COP-MOP 3 in decision NP 3/1A. Other lessons learned from past experiences and considerations regarding the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework have also been incorporated in the proposed process and timeline. Given that, as highlighted in section Roman numeral 6C of the document, the Secretary would only have 1 month following the deadline for the submission of the national reports to undertake an extensive analysis required for conducting the assessment. it is essential that parties submit their reports before the deadline of 28 February 2026. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Secretariat, for that introduction. I will now open the floor for interventions. As this item is under the Nagoya Protocol, I will give priority in the list of speakers to the two parties to the protocol. I ask that all interventions to be focused on concrete suggestions on the draft recommendations. Among the parties to the protocol, I wish to give the floor first to the parties want to take floor on behalf of any regional groups, please. Egypt, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we gather to assess and review the effectiveness of the Nagoya Protocol, it's essential to address critical aspects of its implementation and the need for further improvement. Egypt, on behalf of the African Group, acknowledges the progress made, but also recognizes significant challenges that hinder the full realization of the protocol objective, particularly in benefit sharing, which is crucial for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. We believe a bifurcated approach to effectively address this issue includes: first, evaluation of implementation by party. A dedicated process is necessary to systemically evaluate how countries are implementing the Nagoya Protocol. This includes compliance with domestic legislation and regulation requirement on access and benefit sharing, Article 15 and 16, on monitoring the utilization of genetic resource, Article 17, including the designation of checkpoint, as well as the provision related to indigenous people and local community, including Article 5, 6, 7, and 12. Assessing checkpoints and mutual legal assistance obligation are, as outlined in the element of the section of Annex 1, is imperative. This will provide a comprehensive understanding of the current status and identify areas requiring immediate attention. And another process for the further work of non-functional articles. Concurrently, a separate process must be focused on enhancing the functionality of specific articles such as the multilateral benefit sharing mechanism and addressing issues like digital sequence information. Africa emphasizes that COPMOP Decision 3, Paras 5b highlights the priority of further work to enhance the implementation by parties. This includes the need for compliance with domestic legislation, monitoring the utilization of genetic resources, and ensuring effective benefit sharing mechanism. Despite our concerted efforts, we are falling short in achieving substantive progress on benefit sharing, which is severely impacting biodiversity conservation and sustainable use. The Nagoya Protocol future is under threat due to various challenges. On capacity building support, there is a pressing need to support capacity building initiative and improve the modality of implementing support under the protocol. On compliance challenge, difficulties in adhering to mutually agreed terms are exacerbated by the intellectual property system, which operate under different international regimes that do not always align with the ABS clearinghouse mechanism. On technology and knowledge transfer, a coordinated approach is lacking, highlighting the need for developing and a more unified process. On emerging issues, data collection tool must be designated to capture and address emerging issues such as DSI, synthetic biology, and global multilateral benefit sharing system. To overcome these constraints, we must strengthen our national legal framework, foster regional and sub-regional synergy, enhance institutional training, establish genetic material control points, bolster political will, and empower local communities. In conclusion, the African Group calls for a renewed commitment for addressing these challenges by implementing a dual process approach, focusing on both the evaluation and improvement. We can enhance the effectiveness of the Nagoya Protocol and ensure its role in promoting equitable benefit sharing, conservation, and sustainable use of biodiversity. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Egypt. European Union, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the European Union and its 27 member states. The EU and its member states wish to thank the Secretariat for their proposals regarding the second assessment and review of the Nagoya Protocol on the basis of the elements in the annex. We wish to take the opportunity to express our appreciation for the efforts made by parties and organizations in the progress of the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol. The EU and its member states would nevertheless also highlight the work that still needs to be done. We believe that the analysis of sufficient information and relevant data is key for the evaluation of the effectiveness of the Nagoya Protocol. We therefore strongly encourage parties to submit their national report well before the deadline to allow for extensive analysis. The EU and its member states propose adding the reports of the Commission on Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture of the UN FAO as sources of information for the second assessment and review of the Nagoya Protocol to provide information on the implementation of Article 8C. Additionally, we would like to highlight the need for consistency in the naming of the Informal Advisory Committee across paragraphs 7 and 8 and the draft recommendation for Agenda Item 5B, Capacity Building and Development Action Plan for the Nagoya Protocol. We will submit our text proposals in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, European Union. Switzerland, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Switzerland supports the methodology for conducting the second assessment and review of the effectiveness of the Nagoya Protocol as proposed in Section 6 of document CBD-Live/12. In our review, the suggested elements and sources of information as listed in the annex in Section 7 of the pre-session document are appropriate for the envisaged assessment and review. In particular, the information provided by parties in their first national reports will be highly relevant, as well as the information provided in the Access and Benefit Sharing Clearinghouse. Therefore, parties should complete the reporting process early and submit their first national reports on the implementation of the protocol well before the deadline and ensure that relevant information is published on the Access and Benefit Sharing Clearinghouse. The latter, moreover, is important not only for the assessment and review, but crucial for the implementation of the protocol in general. Switzerland supports the proposed process and timeline in this regard. Mr. Chair, we also support the extension of the work of the Informal Advisory Group on capacity building for the implementation of the protocol. It should be ensured that the work of the Informal Advisory Group and the Compliance Committee under the Nagoya Protocol are complementary and non-duplicative. The commissioning of a scoping study, subject to the availability of resources, could be helpful to identify challenges to effective implementation of the protocol. It should be ensured that this work is not a duplication of the work previously conducted under Article 10 of the Nagoya Protocol. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. Malawi, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Malawi supports the statement led by Egypt on behalf of Africa. Regarding learning from the Cartagena Protocol, Malawi sees the relevance and usefulness of having a small expert group or a body to review the analysis prepared by the Secretariat in more details and provide input to a larger decision-making body, such as the subsidiary body on implementation or the Conference of Parties, serving as the meeting of the parties to the protocol. We welcome the recommendations by the Compliance Committee on the need to collect information on challenges related to the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol as requested in Decision NP3/1A. However, we would like to indicate that this should be accompanied by collection of information on possible and potential solutions to those challenges, as parties would have proposed solutions that would inform recommendations for improvement to the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol. We also welcome the suggestion by the Compliance Committee to expand and extend the mandate of the Informal Advisory Committee on Capacity Building to provide advice on issues related to the implementation of the protocol, awareness raising and assessment and review, with a clear mandate to provide recommendation for consideration by the subsidiary body on implementation. With regards to elements to be considered in the review, in addition to assessing the effectiveness of the Article 18, 10, and 23, we would also like to include Article 4 and also reports from parties under Target 13 of the framework. We have made textual amendments to this decision document and shall be submitted in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malawi. Zimbabwe, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Zimbabwe supports the statement made by Egypt on behalf of Africa. Zimbabwe recognizes the importance of implementing the provisions of the Nagoya Protocol. As such, Zimbabwe has legislation for access and benefit sharing of genetic resources, as well as the protection of indigenous genetic resource-based knowledge in Zimbabwe. We have taken note of the draft decision with a proposed methodology for the second assessment and review of the effectiveness of the Nagoya Protocol. We are cognizant of the importance of this process. The rapid advancement in technologies such as synthetic biology and the use of DSI present challenges in effective implementation of the Nagoya Protocol. Hence, these issues need to be well articulated in the targeted survey, which seeks to gather information. Noting that the national reports will be key in gathering data for the second assessment and review of the Nagoya Protocol, we strongly encourage the GEF to release funds on time for the necessary data gathering processes to be done on time. Particular attention is required in assessing the progress made in implementing Article 10 on a global multilateral benefit sharing mechanism, given its importance in fulfilling provisions of the Nagoya Protocol. We support the commissioning of a study to gather data on challenges faced by parties in effective implementation and compliance to the Nagoya Protocol. This study will significantly contribute to the second assessment and review. In conclusion, though the assessment and review of the effectiveness of the Nagoya Protocol is important, it needs to be coupled with the requisite capacity building and development efforts. In addition, a review of the effectiveness of the current capacity building and development activities would be appreciated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. Democratic Republic of Congo, you have the floor, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor. The Democratic Republic of the Congo supports the statement made by Egypt on behalf of the African Group. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is really interested in the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol on access to genetic resources and fair and equitable benefit sharing arising from the utilization. At the present time, the assessment and review of the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol is proving to be very important. We believe that one of the major reasons which could lead to the success of the implementation of the protocol lies in the implementation of Article 8J. It's within that context that yesterday, during the day dedicated to Africa, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in collaboration with Canada and the IIFB, organized an informal dialogue. This dialogue was on the implementation of Article 8J and other provisions of the convention which are relevant. The dialogue led to a lot of success and appreciation, in particular addressing the issue of the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol, were addressed. We should remind ourselves that at COP15, we're asked to ensure there would be a work program for the implementation of Article 8J. It's now strange to note today that there hasn't been enough progress in terms of the development of that work plan. We would ask for more efforts to be made so that a work group on this can be set up. We also need substantive work to really set out institutional modalities, because we have noted that ad hoc working groups on Article 8J is one that's lasted many, many years under our convention. Therefore, we continue to highlight the fact that the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol requires capacity building and resource mobilization as necessary, and the review of the implementation should also begin implementing concrete provisions for the implementation to access to and benefit sharing from digital sequencing on genetic resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Democratic Republic of Congo. Japan, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Japan is grateful for the work conducted by the Secretariat and appreciates the strong efforts made by many relevant organizations in the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol. Japan considers it is important to have regular assessment and review of the effectiveness of the protocol and its key provisions. On the other hand, from the viewpoint of work efficiency, we will hope that the review of the implementation of the protocol will be implemented by making maximum use of existing resources. Regarding the description of the element small e of the second assessment and review of the Nagoya Protocol in the annex of the document SBI-04/12, Japan understands that the disclosure requirement for genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge, which had been discussed at WIPO, aims to enhance the efficacy, transparency, and quality of the patent system, and to prevent patents from being granted erroneously. Hence, the discussion at WIPO is not directly related to access and benefit sharing. In this context, Japan would like to suggest deleting the reference to the reports of the Intergovernmental Committee of the WIPO from the sources of information. Japan will submit specific text proposals in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Japan. Brazil, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Brazil appreciates the draft decision provided under document CBD-SBI-04/12. Regarding OP3, we do acknowledge the importance of submitting national reports in a timely manner. At the same time, we do understand that many developing countries require financial assistance to prepare those reports. Therefore, we fear that expressions such as well before the deadline may not provide a balanced approach to this topic. Regarding the annex on elements and sources of information for the second assessment, we take note with concern with the reference to targeted surveys. Building on our experience in different intercession activities, we know that surveys are often circulated on a very short notice, thus not allowing for the full and effective participation of developing countries. Any survey needs to be conducted in an inclusive and transparent manner. Surveys need to allow sufficient time and should ensure an equitable and balanced collection of information from different regions. We'd also appreciate further clarification on the use of Google Analytics. Brazil welcomes the proposal to commission scoping study, subject to the availability of resources, on the possible reasons and underlying root causes for the challenges to the effective implementation and compliance. We believe this study could provide a comprehensive understanding of challenges implementation and complement the list of elements and sources of information provided in the annex. This study should consider the specific challenges faced by developing countries, including those related to means of implementation. Brazil is not in a position to accept the proposal just made by Japan to delete reports of the Intergovernmental Committee on Intellectual Property and Genetic Resources, Traditional Knowledge and Folklore of WIPO. Last week, WIPO just approved a specific treaty to ensure compliance on the relevance of the patent system with relevant issues regarding genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge. Therefore, we're not in a position to accept the proposal from Japan. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Uganda, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Uganda would like to align itself with Africa's position as delivered by Egypt on this important matter. Mr. Chairperson, would like to thank the Secretariat for preparation of the relevant documents, and specific to note that Uganda is currently reviewing its legal regime on access and benefit sharing to bring it to conformity with the protocol and emerging contemporary issues, especially on technology developments. In agreement with Brazil, while undertaking a detailed study on possible reasons underlying root causes for the challenge to effective implementation and compliance, and how best they could enhance the assessment, we hope that aspects including review of implementation, operation of access and benefit sharing clearing house, access and benefit sharing measures, number of international recognized certificates for compliance, stock taking of the use of model contractual clauses, codes of conduct, guidelines, best standards and practices, as well as indigenous peoples and local communities' customary laws, community protocols and procedures remain very cardinal in this undertaking. We welcome the expansion of the mandate of the Informal Advisory Committee, especially on capacity building as reiterated by DRC. This will go ahead to provide issues and contemporary guidance on implementation of the protocol, but in a complementary and non-duplicative manner. We commend the Secretariat's strategies for improvement. However, we think that necessary reviews attendant to this process are very important, and we hope this will be done to address the gaps. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Uganda. Argentina, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, Argentina would like to thank the Secretariat for preparing the document on the second assessment and review of the effectiveness of the Nagoya Protocol. Broadly speaking, Argentina agrees with the document. Nevertheless, we would like to make the following comments. First of all, the date set out for the submission of the national report on the implementation of the protocol is the 28th of February 2026. The decision that the meeting of the parties adopts should not lead to additional obligations in this regard, such as submitting the report well before the deadline. Secondly, Argentina does not believe it's appropriate to use an artificial intelligence tool as a source for the assessment and review of the effectiveness of the Nagoya Protocol. We will send our proposed amendments in writing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Argentina. The following parties are in queue: Kenya, United Kingdom, Tajikistan, Morocco, Syrian Arab Republic. Kenya, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Kenya aligns with the statement read by Egypt on behalf of Africa. Kenya, since the ratification of the Nagoya Protocol, has actively been reviewing and developing varied strategies ranging from domestic legislations for effective implementation of the protocol. This is reflected on the ABS clearinghouse. The country's experiences and lessons learned can contribute to improving the implementation of the protocol. In this regard, Kenya takes note of the emerging issues of DSI, synthetic biology, and global multilateral benefit sharing mechanism. Definitions, for example, DSI being part of genetic resources, IPLC, free prior informed consent, and prior informed consent subject to domestic legislations, country of origin, intellectual property, data ownership, compliance and enforcement, legal clarity and certainty in domestic legislations, which in most cases have not been reviewed to align with the provisions of the Nagoya Protocol, and that have an impact on the effectiveness and future of the Nagoya Protocol. Kenya requests the Informal Advisory Committee on the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol and the Compliance Committee under the Nagoya Protocol through the Secretariat to review data collection tools to consider emerging issues and update the questions for the national reporting to factor in the progress in implementation of the protocol. Kenya also supports the commissioning of the scoping study subject to the availability of resources on the implementation, on the possible reasons and underlying root causes for the challenges to effective implementation and compliance, more so compliance with legal frameworks and mutually agreed terms. Kenya too requests the Secretariat to develop a coordination mechanism with the IP system, that is WIPO and other related treaties, to enhance compliance with mutually agreed terms during IP protection process and revise the reporting questions to factor in this aspect. We appreciate the WIPO parties' resolution to consider origin of genetic resources in line with the PIC and MAT as part of disclosures in IP granting process. Kenya therefore requests parties, while developing their domestic ABS legislations, to consider aspects of research ethical approvals, due diligence and intellectual property as a requirement for research, academia and industry organizations during licensing on utilization of genetic resources. We will submit a written statement to the Secretariat. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. The UK thanks the Executive Secretary for the note on the development of the methodology for the second assessment and review of the effectiveness of the Nagoya Protocol. The UK is committed to the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol and find it particularly helpful that parties are simultaneously addressing the assessment and review of the protocol and the action plan on capacity building and development at this meeting. This presents an opportunity to identify the challenges of implementing the protocol, as well as where capacity building and development can play a role in addressing them. We support the draft decision to conduct the second assessment of the protocol based on the elements in the annex. We do, however, have a couple of comments to share. First, we are concerned by the volume of work that the Secretary is requested to undertake in paragraph 7 of the draft decision and the time available to deliver it. In particular, the note highlights the very short time frame available to the Secretary to conduct a review of the national reports as part of this process. To support them in their work, we call on parties to ensure the timely submission of the national reports to provide the maximum time possible for the analysis and synthesis on the implementation of the protocol. Second, with regard to the scoping study in paragraph 7b, should the resources be available to undertake this work, we would encourage the participation of stakeholders along the value chain to understand the full range of challenges faced in the implementation of the protocol. The UK authorities work closely with UK users of genetic resources, who we know would be very pleased to share their experiences and contribute to this work. Lastly, the ABS Clearinghouse will play an important part in the assessment and review process. To ensure that the assessment and review accurately reflects implementation of the protocol globally, we call on parties to ensure their national profiles are up to date. We do not have any written edits to make to this draft decision, and I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom. Tajikistan, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We thank the Secretariat for the note provided. Directly on the note. First, according to Table 1 of the note, the 7th CBD National Report and the 1st MP report should be submitted simultaneously by February 2026. In the case of individual countries, this is a complex process, as the preparation of the report is handled by one responsible body, which is not always well-resourced. In this regard, financial, technical, and advisory support will be critical for timely submission. Second, the results of detailed and objective assessment and review can play an important role in the further allocation of resources for the MP implementation. When assessing national progress, it's also important to consider the timing of a party's ratification of the protocol, as well as the resources a party possesses, in order to truly understand and justify the results achieved by the time of the assessment. From the timeline and milestones provided, the exact deadlines for submitting the global review and the second NP assessment are also not entirely clear. If the national CBD and P reports are submitted at the same time and the global review and assessment are conducted in the same year, there is a risk that the final reports will not be sufficiently objective and will not reflect the real situation. The note to the table also refers to the importance of timely submission of reports by parties for evaluation and review. But in order to mitigate risks, we believe it is appropriate to set more realistic deadlines for the final reports on the global review of overall progress and the second assessment of the MP effectiveness. Regarding the formats for the 7th national report and the 1st MP report, for the effectiveness of this process, it's appropriate to hold additional consultation for the responsible organization in the field, so that there is a correct and clear understanding for completion. We also welcome the sources of information presented in the annex as the most objective sources of NP effectiveness. Nevertheless, we suggest not to ignore the possibility of direct interaction with the responsible national authorities for clarification or requesting additional information on this or that aspect. We will submit our comments to the Secretariat in writing form. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Tajikistan. The following parties are in queue: Morocco, Syrian Arab Republic, Philippines, India, Cuba. Morocco, you have the floor, please.
Merci. Thank you so much, Chair. Morocco endorses Egypt's statement on behalf of Africa. Morocco also takes notes with satisfaction of the proposed method for carrying out the second assessment and review, and backs the recommendation in the document. So, the first national report under the Nagoya Protocol is one of the elements and sources of information proposed for the second assessment and review of the Nagoya Protocol, and it's the most important of them. To enable us to submit the first national report on time, Morocco proposes that the GEF integrate the funds for the first national report with those for the 7th national report under the CBD to lighten the application procedures. Aware as we are that the funds dedicated for the updating of the NBSAPs take into account the 7th national report. Thank you.
Thank you, Morocco. Syrian Arab Republic. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we would like to thank the Secretariat for the preparation of this valuable document. We think that the adoption of the Nagoya Protocol is extremely important to the parties thereof, particularly that there is a multiple use of genetic resources by the parties, because it's important to avail these parties of these genetic resources. Mr. President, Syria was one of the first 50 countries that have ratified the protocol and put it into execution. But we need to prepare our national resources with a view to achieving the fair sharing of the uses of genetic resources. This has been enshrined in the protocol. Funds have been assigned to provide support for the member countries, but we haven't received any support or resources. According to the document 4/12, and in accordance with decision 15/6, and in accordance with the timeline for the review of the progress achieved in the implementation of the protocol, and given the absence of any resources by the donor countries, Syria has not been able to live up to the implementation of the protocol. So I think the protocol is going to fail in our country because we are denied access to the resources. We need to draw up our report and draw up the progress achieved in reporting, and we need to avail ourselves of any information exchange mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you. Syrian Arab Republic. Philippines, you have the floor, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. The Philippines welcomes the document SBI-04/12, which sets out the methodology for the second assessment and review of the effectiveness of the Nagoya Protocol. Allow us to provide the following observations on the annex, which sets out the elements and sources of information for the second assessment and review of the Nagoya Protocol in page 9 of the document. Number 1, generally, the sources of information can be described as internal to the Nagoya Protocol, largely coming from the parties and the national reports, as observed in paragraph 13 of these documents. These reports are usually described as low in number, aside from being submitted late. This does not reflect how the Nagoya Protocol impacts other players in the utilization of genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge. The current sources of information give a picture on how the Nagoya Protocol is implemented, but not whether Nagoya Protocol is working to really generate benefits as set in Goal C and Target 13 of the KMGBF. The Philippines deem it important to get an idea of what the other players in the utilization of genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge, including the non-parties, are doing in relation to or in response to the compliance procedure of the Nagoya Protocol. This information will provide a better idea of the effectiveness of the Nagoya Protocol. 3, we suggest these other players, including the non-parties and industry associations and research institutions that get permits for access, and those working in the value chain of these genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge, must be covered by the targeted surveys and scoping studies that are identified to be done in Annex. As indicated in elements A to I, in elements E, in addition to the WIPO, the Philippines suggests to include other international entities that track and monitor microbial culture collections, especially those that host digital sequencing information. The results of the overview of the practices of these players, including the non-parties, will give the parties to the Nagoya Protocol an idea of whether players and non-parties have actually modified their practices or they have encountered difficulties. Such results may also point to opportunities for further development of the value chain of genetic resources. Overall, Mr. Chair, the Philippines is of view that this is what needs to be included into the methodology for the second assessment of the Nagoya Protocol. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Philippines. India, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. India appreciates the analysis of past experience with assessment and review under the Nagoya and Cartagena protocols and lessons learned, and also bring the relevant timeline, milestones, and reporting and reviewing progress under the conventions and the protocols. We welcome the recommendations of the Compliance Committee on the proposed methodology for the second assessment and review of the effectiveness of the Nagoya Protocol. We wish to state that the second assessment should also include a scoping study on the possible reasons and underlying root causes for the challenge to effective implementation and compliance and how best they could be enhanced. India has done quite extensive works on implementation of Nagoya Protocol, including amendments to the national legislation to give effect to the provisions of the protocol. I would like to mention here that an elaborative administrative structure up to local level has been established to strengthen the ABS mechanism. We also welcome the recommendation to conduct the second assessment and review of the protocol on the basis of elements in the annex to the document. We hope that proposed review process would reflect parties' progress in implementation of the provisions of the Nagoya Protocol. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, India. Cuba, you have the floor, please.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Chair. Cuba thanks Secretariat for the work on this topic and reiterates the importance of the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol and its goals. On general lines, we agree with the proposal made in the draft recommendation for the second assessment and review of the protocol as being considered by the COPMOP to the Nagoya Protocol, noting that the deadline for submission of the first national reports by parties on the implementation is 28th of February 2026. All efforts to move forwards in the process are welcome. Nevertheless, Cuba agrees with that set out by the delegation of Brazil and Argentina in that this deadline of the 28th of February 2026 should not involve additional requirements to submit national reports many days before that date. Within this context, Cuba highlights the importance of strengthening capacity building in developing countries and for the Global Environment Fund and its implementing agencies to guarantee that parties can submit their roadmaps without delay. Thank you.
Thank you, Cuba. The following parties are in queue, please. Peru, Dominican Republic, Eswatini. Peru, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. This will be a brief statement. Peru supports the statement made by Brazil, Kenya, and the Philippines on the World International Property Organization, stating that it's an important organization for providing information on genetic resources and the fair and equitable benefit sharing, which enables countries to implement the protocol in an effective manner, taking into account the best available science in this regard. Therefore, Peru believes that it's essential to ensure participation within organizations which provide information for the Nagoya Protocol. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peru. Dominican Republic, you have the floor, please.
Sí, gracias, señor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The delegation of the Dominican Republic aligns itself with statements made by others before us. We need to highlight the need for capacity building in the distribution of benefits. The Dominican Republic has been able to make progress in its regulatory framework and implementation framework, achieving a second phase of implementation, taking as a basis the experiences acquired in implementation over previous years. Nevertheless, we believe that we need to strengthen benefit sharing. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Dominican Republic. For a while, Eswatini was on the screen. If Eswatini wish to take the floor, I would like to give it. Yeah. Eswatini, you have the floor, please. Okay. Thank you. Indonesia, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. On this Agenda 9, Indonesia would like to convey 3 points. First, Indonesia appreciates the Secretariat for the report and mainly can support the recommendations made by the Compliance Committee. We agree with the idea to have a preliminary review of the compliance procedures and mechanism as part of the second assessment and review with a view to identifying areas for further consideration. We also agree that the process for the second assessment and review would include a targeted survey to collect information on challenges related to the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol as requested in Decision NP3/1A, including the need for a scoping study on the possible reasons and underlying root causes for the challenges to effective implementation and compliance and how best they could be enhanced. Nevertheless, on the elements and sources of information on the annex, for element A, we would like to propose to elaborate it further. Or it could also be a new element F, which includes an assessment for Article 4 related to upcoming specialized on genetic resources, assessing the development of negotiations of agreement under ITP...
Go slow, please. Go slow.
Okay, sorry. Assessing the development of negotiations of agreement under ITP-GRFA, the pandemic agreement negotiations under WHO, and the benefit sharing negotiations under BBNG, which all are discussing the ABS negotiations. Second, like others, we are concerned on the operational paragraph 3, which so strictly requires the submission be well before the deadline. Perhaps we could use a more flexible language, which could provide a more flexible and balanced approach, which considers the need and situation of developing countries, especially since many developing countries require financial assistance to conclude these reports. And third, considering that we are still discussing the future of the role of the Global Environmental Facility under our convention, perhaps references to GAF in the decision could include some sort of for greater certainty language which reflects this situation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. I request the parties to please upload your statements as early as possible. I see no more requests from parties and will now invite interventions from observers. Given limitations on time, statements will be limited to 2 minutes only. If you are speaking on behalf of a stakeholder group, kindly say so at the beginning of your intervention. Please focus your statements on concrete suggestions. I will offer parties the opportunity to support proposals made by the observers. IPLCs, you have the floor, please.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much, Chairman. I'm speaking on behalf of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity, IIFB. The IIFB wishes to thank the Secretariat as well as the States Parties for their very useful contribution to the dialogue on Article 8G organized yesterday. The IIFB welcomes the report contained in document CBD-SBI-04/12 on the assessment and review of the effectiveness of the Nagoya Protocol. The IIFB appreciates the mechanism established for contributions by indigenous peoples and local communities to the Nagoya Protocol Compliance Committee and the Informal Advisory Committee on Capacity Building. The IIFB urges parties to support the full and effective participation of indigenous peoples and local communities in the implementation of the protocol, especially by strengthening their knowledge and capacity in terms of access and benefit sharing, and by supporting the development by indigenous peoples and local communities of community protocols and procedures. Minimum requirements for mutually agreed terms and standards, contractual clauses concerning access and benefit sharing arising from the utilization of traditional laws associated with genetic resources, taking into account their customary laws. The IIFB notes the importance of putting in place national access and benefit sharing frameworks that include measures on traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources in order to guarantee indigenous peoples and local communities access, equitable sharing of benefits arising from the use of genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge. The IIFB insists on respect for the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities and reaffirms that access to traditional knowledge must be based on respect for free, prior, and informed consent, and in accordance with Target 21 of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. The IIFB calls on parties to support the involvement of indigenous peoples and local communities, women and young people in providing their input and views in the preparation of national reports on the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol. The IIFB encourages parties to consider regional approaches to support the development of measures for the harmonized implementation of the protocol through inter alia activities such as legislative, administrative, or policy measures to implement the fair and equitable sharing of benefits relating to genetic resources held by indigenous peoples and local communities, and to provide technical and financial support for the development of community protocols. The IIFB presents the following recommendations. In Section 7 of document SBI-04/12. Section 7. In paragraph 2, which begins with urges parties to add women and youth after indigenous peoples and local communities. In paragraph 6, which begins with invite parties also to add women and youth after indigenous peoples and local communities. We look forward to continuing the work of implementing the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and the CBD as a whole. We wish to convey gratitude to the parties for their consideration and look forward to their support. We will, of course, send our statement to the Secretariat. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, IPLCs. I'll now offer parties the opportunity to support the proposals made by IPLCs. Quotiva, DRC, Djibouti, Guinea-Bissau, Comoros. Thank you. Thank you.
Egypt.
Yeah, Egypt. Philippines. And Peru. Yeah. That last, she is raising hand. This one. Zambia? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I see no more requests for the floor. Thank you, delegates, for sharing your views. This concludes our consideration of agenda item 9. We have had a very rich discussion and some good suggestions. With the help of the Secretariat, I will prepare a CRP, that's conference room paper, and will bring it for consideration to a later plenary session. esteemed delegates, we will now take up item 11, review of the programs of work of the convention, together with item 12 on the multi-year program of work of the conference of the parties. I will start by asking the Secretariat to introduce the documents. Secretariat, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. For item 11, the Secretariat has prepared document CBD-SBI-0414 to support the subsidiary body in consideration of this matter. In addition, in its recommendation 26.2 on scientific and technical needs to support the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the subsidiary body on scientific, technical and technological advice invited the SBI to consider implications of that recommendation for work related to a number of matters, including the programs of work of the Convention and the multi-year program of work of the Conference of the Parties. The subsidiary body is therefore also invited to consider document CBD/substa/rec/26.2. Concerning item 12, in its decision 1533, the Conference of the Parties took note of a preliminary list of issues to be addressed at its future meetings, and it requested the Executive Secretary to propose further issues aligned with the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework and closely related themes to be addressed at the 17th, 18th, and 19th meetings of COP, for consideration by the SBI at its 4th meeting, with a view to completing the list of issues. To support the subsidiary body in consideration of this matter, the Secretariat prepared document CBD/SBI/4/15. That document contains a draft recommendation with an annex that contains a proposal of matters that could be addressed at the 17th, 18th, and 19th meetings of the COP. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat, for the introduction. I will now invite interventions from the floor that address both these matters. I will take statements made on behalf of regional groups before inviting individual parties. Depending on the time available, I may then be able to take some interventions from observers. I encourage interventions to be focused on concrete suggestions, including on the draft recommendation on item 12. Statements on behalf of regional groups may be up to 5 minutes. Statements by parties will be limited to 3 minutes. I now invite statements from parties speaking on behalf of regional groups. I now invite intervention from individual parties. Statements, this will be, sorry for the slip up. I now invite statements from parties speaking on behalf of regional groups. Uganda, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Uganda will be delivering this statement on behalf of Africa. Africa would like to appreciate the effort in preparation of the note by the Secretariat on this agenda item with reference to CBD-SBI-04/14, which actually provides for the review and analysis of the relevant programs of work of the Convention based on the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, but also as a strategic plan for implementation of the Convention and its protocols. We took note of the wealth of tools and guidance developed by the Convention that present important means and also the analysis of scientific and technical needs to support the implementation of the framework, including the identification of gaps in tools and guidance, CBD/Substar 26/3 and CBD/Substar 26-INF/15. However, Africa calls for further reviews to address the gaps in the tools and guidance developed under the Convention in order to achieve the targets for addressing the cross-cutting issues of the framework. It is our call that continuous further in-depth review of the programs of work remain warranted to address emerging cross-sector issues, to take into account the gaps identified in account of ongoing work under the Convention, considering the advancing of new work on other issues, especially capacity building, technical and scientific cooperation mechanisms, and proposals of program of work for the budget of the Secretariat. We equally agree with the possibility of advancing new work in the proposed multi-year program of work of the Conference of Parties for purposes of effectiveness and synergies, while also noting the need for substantive proposed assignments on this matter. We call for improved knowledge management of the available tools and guidance, enhanced technical and scientific cooperation, capacity building, synergies, while aiming at implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Mr. Chairman, with regards to the multi-year program of work of the Conference of Parties, Africa takes note of the decision 1533 of 19th December 2022, where actually it was the effect the strategic planning and review of progress of the implementation of the Convention will be undertaken in accordance to this. We appreciate the relevant documents prepared with reference to CBD/SBI-04/15, which set out in the annex the draft decision relevant issues proposed for consideration by the Conference of Parties at the 17th, 18th, 19th meetings based on the schedule for the review of the implementation of the Convention and other mandates adopted by the Conference of the Parties at the 15th and the program of the work on intergovernmental science policy platform. Whereas Africa takes note of the recommendation to effectively update its multi-year program of work up to 2030 according to the list of issues set out in Annex, Africa calls for a clear methodology and a framework for prioritization of the issues pointed out in Annex, because they are critical, important issues that are evolving that we need a special consideration on, especially on future performance of the Global Biodiversity Fund, and with reference to capacity building, resource mobilization, among others. We also would like to request the Secretary to provide a report on issues identified for 2024 review in Decision 1533, especially regarding to the 4-year framework for outcome-oriented program priorities and assessment of funding needs to inform the replenishment process for GEF 9 with reference to 2026-2030. Development of new program of work and institutional arrangements are also very pertinent in this element. Equally, attendant activities such as consultancies undertaken on those issues of prevailing circumstances and past circumstances should be shared in due time. Further to that, we know that emerging related review needs on other aspects such as digital sequence information call for a clear framework on actually understanding all attendant programs across all convention matters to be looked at. We'll be submitting our submissions as they contain changes that the group will like to introduce in the recommendation, but with specific reference to the clear methodology on identifying priority issues moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Uganda. European Union, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the European Union and its 27 member states. The EU and its member states recognize the close relationship between SBI-04 agenda items 11 and 12 and agree that there is no need to elaborate on any separate recommendations to COP with regards to the review of the programs of work beyond what is currently foreseen in the multi-year program of work and in the recommendations set out in Substa document L3. However, we note that the parties need more information to be able to determine whether the programs of work need to be updated. For COP to make this assessment, we considered that it would be useful to introduce a recommendation from SBI that the Executive Secretary report on and make recommendations for the alignment of the implementation of the programs of work on the agenda of COP16 with the GBF. This would be a useful precursor to the work envisaged under paragraph 5 of the recommendation set out in Substa document L3. We would also request the Secretariat to prepare a list of when the other programs of work will be considered and by which COP, to ensure that the implementation of all programs of work is brought in line with the GBF, in line with the implementation of the GBF across the multi-year program of work period. By this, we do not mean that the Secretariat needs to undertake a complete overhaul of each program of work. It could mean simply proposing updating cross-references to the GBF or referencing relevant tools or suggesting additional capacity building measures, for example. We welcome the discussions during Substat 26 and the recommendation in document Substat/26/L3 and can agree that new topics will be proposed to COP16 for inclusion in its programs of work. However, we continue to consider that the topic of equity and human rights-based approaches is important and regret that this was not taken up as part of the recommendation from Substat 26. The EU and its member states wish to further consider at COP16 how this topic best be addressed to complement the new program of work on Article 8J. In terms of the new topics, further consideration needs to be given at COP16 as to what form any future work under each topic should take. And we would ask the Secretariat to set out options on this for consideration by COP16. Given the nature of the suggested topics, we are of the view that both Substa and SBI will continue to have a role to play in relation to any ongoing work. We agree that other organizations and initiatives are sometimes better placed than the Secretariat to develop new guidance and tools, and that in some circumstances it may be more appropriate to invite other organizations to develop these in collaboration with the Secretariat. Furthermore, depending on the outcome of the discussions under SBI for Agenda Item 10 on mainstreaming, the EU and its member states may wish to suggest further work on tools and guidance related to mainstreaming. We consider it important to reflect on the division of work in order not to overload one COP. This is important both to provide enough resources and capacity during the biennium to enable the Secretariat and the parties to adequately prepare for the regular standing items of the meetings and the COP, and because COP17 will be a key moment in the stocktake of both the Global Biodiversity Framework and the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund. We propose some adjustments as regards the timing to address outcomes from IPES. We would also note that the formulation to only consider the second global assessment at COP19 seems rather weak compared to the formulation used for the IPES assessments at COPs 17 and 18, and this should therefore be made consistent. Finally, the EU and its member states consider that a multi-year program of work should be kept under review by the COP so that the parties have an opportunity to engage in and comment on any necessary updates. We will submit textual proposals to cover these suggestions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, European Union. I see no more requests from parties who wish to speak on behalf of regional groups. Therefore, we will move on to individual parties, please. The parties in queue are Zimbabwe, Russian Federation, Egypt, Canada. Zimbabwe, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Zimbabwe supports the statement made by Uganda on behalf of Africa. We note that an analysis carried out by the Secretariat indicated gaps in the tools and guidance developed under the Convention for Achievement of Targets which address cross-cutting issues of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. The gaps need to be considered when developing programs of work and budget for the Secretariat. Capacity building and development and technical and scientific cooperation are important elements to ensure use of the tools and guidance developed under the Convention, particularly by developing countries. Zimbabwe notes that further in-depth review of the program of work is critical to aid the successful implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We support the advancing of new work in the proposed multi-year program of work of the Conference of Parties. Mr. Chair, that was for agenda item 11. So for agenda item 12, in our view, the multi-year program of work is a very key element which requires critical assessment to ensure effective implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Zimbabwe takes note of the introductory notes prepared by the Secretariat for this agenda item, particularly the statement which states that the annex of the draft decision contains selected key substantive items. The methodology used in identifying items in the annex of the draft decisions needs to be clearly spelled out. Though the issues noted in the annex are important, we are of the view that there is need to thoroughly review the selected items with a view of adding other critical items such as mainstreaming, capacity building and development, and review of the effectiveness of the processes under the Convention and its protocols. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. Russian Federation, you have the floor, please.
Good morning. Good morning, sir, dear colleagues. Sir, we back the proposed guidelines and trends for work for the period through to the 19th Conference of the Parties, as far as assessing progress of the implementation of the Global Framework Program is concerned, as well as the resources for implementing it. These will be very important elements in our work. This also applies to consideration of the second report, of the second assessment of biodiversity and ecosystemic services. It is very important to determine what the follow-up steps for the development of the Convention are going to be for the period through to 2050, following the conclusion of actions and work, and I certainly hope the successful implementation of the current Global Framework Program. At the same time, as was already noted by Zimbabwe, we would like to have a better understanding of the criteria and principle for selection this further work, especially through to COP 16. And we see here elements which we were discussing intensively 2 weeks ago, and with great difficulty we achieved a temporary compromise. We have to be respectful of our work within the framework of this. The documents have to be in line. The document subset 26 has to be in line, and the text of COP 17 in subparagraphs 1, 2, and 3, Roman 1, 2, and 3 should be between square brackets, and subparagraph 4, Roman 4, should be deleted. I'm going to clarify again that we base ourselves on the fact that the Global Framework Program is a program for all. I repeat, all organizations, all structures of society should play a role and make a contribution to the Global Framework Program. And not everything has to be done exclusively within the framework of the Convention itself. You know, for example, in terms of human rights, at the United Nations, we have a number of specialized instruments, and they, with the use of their experts, should develop relevant documents and provide them to us for our convention. We are extremely concerned by the intrusion of other organizations into the mandate of our convention, including a number of proposals which, in our view, are not agreed on an intergovernmental level in the relevant organizations. We harbor doubts regarding the mandate of representatives of the secretariats of such organizations, that they have the right to make proposals for updating our document during the course of our meetings. We cherish the hope that such organizations, within the framework of their statements, when they make their proposals, will refer to specific decisions made by their guiding bodies. We will submit textual proposal to the Secretariat, as always, in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Russian Federation. Egypt, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Egypt aligned itself with a statement by Uganda on behalf of the African Group. Egypt believes that there are critical issues in the Common Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework that are not adequately addressed by the current Convention on the Biological Diversity Work Program. Specifically, these include reducing the global footprint on consumption in equitable manner by 2030, as captured in Target 16, and addressing the crucial link between biodiversity and sustainable livelihood in the context of nature contribution to people, which is relevant to several targets, including Target 10. To address these gaps, we propose the addition of 2 items to COP17 program of work, namely fair and sustainable resource use and consumption pattern, and the relationship between biodiversity and sustainable livelihood. This item also complements the IPBS transformative change and nexus assessment, respectively, which the COP17 is considering for their implication on the work of the Convention. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Egypt. The parties in queue are Canada, Norway, United Kingdom, Benin, Namibia, Mexico, South Africa. Canada, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Our intervention combines both agenda items 11 and 12. Canada supports the intervention made by the EU. Canada would like to ensure there is space in the MyPow to review and update the programs of work of the Convention as requested in COP15, Decision 15/4, Paragraph 9. As parties, we discussed this last week at Substa 26 and shared the view that we would reiterate our request from COP15 for the Executive Secretary to conduct a strategic review and analysis of the programs of work of the Convention in the context of the framework to facilitate its implementation, and on the basis of this analysis, to prepare draft updates of those programs of work, while also recommending that there is a potential need for new work to be advanced. Therefore, we would suggest that recommendation Substa 26/2, including its draft COP16 decision, be forwarded to COP16 for further discussion on how to adjust the programs of work going forward. On MyPow, there should therefore be a space at COP16 and COP17 for updating of the CBD's programs of work, as well as space pending approval at COP16 for discussing new elements agreed by parties. Additionally, we think there should be a space on the agenda of each COP for the review and update of the programs of work to ensure that the work of the Convention reflects current international science and policy and provides relevant tools and guidance to support implementation. Therefore, we would like to suggest 2 additional paragraphs, one to recall paragraph 9 of Decision 15/4 and to reflect the outcome of this matter from last week at Substa 26, and the second would be a draft COP16 decision to have an item on the agenda of each COP to review and update the programs of work on a rotational basis. We will submit our proposals in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. Norway, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, distinguished colleagues.
Our comments are related to item 12. Norway supports the draft recommendation on the multi-year program of work with the following amendments to the updated list of main issues. Regarding COP17, you should add global analysis. Regarding COP18, add global analysis there as well. And here it is not clear why we should look at related means at COP18. Regarding COP19, add global analysis and strategic actions. We will submit our suggestions in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Norway, for your crisp comments. United Kingdom, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The UK has very similar comments to make as those made by the EU and Canada. We'd like to thank the Secretariat for the note on these two agenda items, which are closely linked to Subster Agenda Item 4 and SBI Agenda Item 13 on the budget. The intersessional period following COP15 has seen an unprecedented number of processes, dialogues, webinars, advisory and technical groups. This has had an impact on the workload of the Secretariat, parties and stakeholders. Therefore, the UK feels an in-depth review of the programmes of work is warranted and must be completed before any further decisions can be taken on future work. We note that Subster 26 last week adopted a recommendation to COP16 that requests the Executive Secretary to carry out the request contained in paragraph 9 of Decision 15.4 to conduct a strategic review and analysis of the programmes of work of the Convention, and on the basis of this analysis to prepare draft updates of those programmes of work. It also included recommendations for identifying new needs, which cover areas outside the remit of scientific and technical needs, but also include areas such as financial resources, capacity building and development, and technical and scientific cooperation. We suggest that under item 11, on the review of the programme of work, SBI should welcome the Subster recommendation and request to see the outcome of the strategic review for its consideration. For item 12 on the multi-year programme of work, we would suggest that discussion on this item be held or be reopened at COP16, where we can review the areas for new work that may have been identified between now and then. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom. Benin, you have the floor, please.
Merci. Thank you so much, sir. Distinguished participants, dear colleagues, Benin fully supports Uganda's statement made on behalf of Africa. We wish to thank the Secretariat as well as all involved actors for all of their contributions and sacrifices in the preparation of the note on this agenda items 11 and 12 and document CBD-SBI-04/15 with its annex. This annex of document CBD-SBI-04/15 presents the list of key issues to be discussed during the 17th Conference of the Parties in 2026, the 18th in 2028, and the 19th Conference of the Parties. Like all the countries present here, Benin believes that 2030 is a year that will set a benchmark for the whole of humanity in assessing our efforts to implement the global framework and biological diversity, which is the only conservation mechanism we have unanimously forged to nurture our shared hope of living in harmony with nature. Sir, Benin notes with a great deal of satisfaction that the substantive issues proposed for consideration are all based on the decisions and other relevant procedures adopted, and strongly supports the draft recommendation and the questions proposed in the annex. However, certain key issues seem to us to be cross-cutting and persistent, and we would like to see them clearly included in the list of issues to be submitted for consideration at future conference of the parties. These include, in particular, pollinators, on which all of biodiversity and life on Earth depends, pesticides, and invasive species. Their inclusion, in cooperation with the IPBS, the FAO, and other relevant institutions, would enable us to avoid joining them in the large section of other points to be clarified in the annex. This would make it possible to focus stakeholders early on the readjustments and adaptations needed on a day-to-day basis to maximize conservation efforts. Sir, the title of the table in the recommendations annex refers to the main issues to be addressed at the meetings of the Conference of the Parties during the period spanning 2023 through to 2030. However, in accordance with paragraph 5 of Decision 15/33 on the multi-year program of work of the Conference of the Parties and paragraph 3 of document CBD-SBI-04/15, it was requested to present the main issues to be addressed during the 2026, 2028 and 2030 COPs. The issues to be addressed during the 16th Conference of the Parties in 2024 are already being prepared with the Bureau and will be made available on the Secretariat's website in accordance with standard practice. Opinion therefore suggests that the title of the table be corrected as follows: List of key issues to be addressed at the 2026, 2028 and 2030 meetings of the Council of the Parties. I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Benny. Namibia, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the floor. Namibia supports Uganda's statement made on behalf of Africa and would like to highlight the critical points raised. We appreciate the comprehensive review and analysis provided by the Secretariat, particularly in aligning the programs of work with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We echo Africa's call for continuous in-depth reviews to address gaps in tools and guidance and to enhance the effectiveness and implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Additionally, we stress the importance of improving knowledge management, technical and scientific cooperation, and capacity building efforts to ensure that developing countries can fully participate and benefit from the Convention's initiatives. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Namibia. Mexico, you have the floor, please.
Gracias, señor
Thank you, Chair. On item 11 of the agenda and document CBD-SBI-04/15, Mexico recognizes the importance of reviewing progress in the implementation of the Convention and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework as set out in Decision 1533 of the Conference of the Parties. It's encouraging to note the commitment of parties to reviewing these aspects in each of the meetings up to the year 2030, which reflects a will to continuously review and improve. We welcome the proposal by the Secretariat of a list of issues to be addressed in future meetings of the Conference of the Parties based on various sources, including previous decisions of the Conference of the Parties and an analysis of scientific and technical needs. We reiterate the need to also address these issues in a comprehensive manner and under a human rights-based approach, recognizing the sovereignty of natural resources, genetic resources, and digital sequencing information, as well as traditional knowledge, in order to move forward towards the goals of the Global Biodiversity Framework. On the recommendation proposed for the adoption of a decision at the 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, we support updating the multi-year program of work up to 2030, in line with the list of issues presented. We also recognize the vital need to maintain flexibility in the program of work in order to address emerging issues and to make the most of identified opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico. South Africa, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. South Africa aligns with the statement made by Uganda on behalf of Africa. We further welcome the list of the main issues to be addressed at COPs during the period 2023 to 2030 and agree that they are aligned with the implementation of the GBF and closely related themes. However, South Africa knows that COP15 in paragraphs 1C and 15 of Decision 15/6 decided to consider at COP16 and at each subsequent COP, that is COP17, COP18, and COP19, a global analysis of information in NB-subs, including national targets to assess the contribution towards the GBF. This item is not included in the list of agenda items for these meetings. South Africa thus proposes the inclusion of this item for COP17, COP18 and COP19 in line with Decision 15/6. This proposal is also in alignment with the timing of elements of planning, monitoring, reporting and review table for the open-ended forum for voluntary country review containing document CBD/SBI/4/4/Ed1. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, South Africa. Colombia, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. First and foremost, Colombia would like to align itself with the statements made by Canada. Now, on the program of work under the Convention, Colombia agrees with the analysis of the Secretariat on scientific and technical needs to support the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework and the inclusion of identification of gaps in terms of tools available. For Colombia, it's key to have technical and scientific cooperation between parties and to take into account the contributions of relevant actors on the contributions of different systems of knowledge which strengthen and make more robust the work. The analysis proposed for programs of work will be strategic to identify areas which need to be worked on in more depth, as well as elements on which parties need to concentrate in order to ensure that they are effective and efficient programs which truly support the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework at all levels. The definition of institutional arrangements and programs of works, in particular for Article 8J, are of particular importance. These will offer an opportunity to effectively address existing issues and explore new thematic areas which you haven't yet have the opportunity to address in the past. In particular, for Colombia, it's important to include Afro-descendants as one of the categories of population groups under the Convention in order to continue strengthening the implementation in a fair manner of the article mentioned. Colombia reiterates the importance and urgency of carrying out the review process in detail and update program of works. It's important for programs to contribute with more specific actions in order to comply with the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Colombia. China, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, we'd like to make our comments on item 11. China supports the review analysis of the work program of the Convention to identify gaps, update the content in a targeted manner, develop tools and guidance to assist parties to implement their MP-SAPs and KMGBF. Mr. Chair, sustainable use of biodiversity is one of the 3 goals of the CBD. China is vigorously promoting green development and harmonious coexistence of man and nature. We're constantly exploring ways to reduce resource intensity and improve people's livelihood and being to achieve high-quality development. We hope to receive more guidance on the sustainable use of the biodiversity under CBD. And now on item 12. The multi-year program of work for the COP provides an important guidance. I thank Secretariat and SBI Chair for preparing the draft recommendations, which is a good foundation for further discussions. China welcomes SBI 415, the COP meeting during 2023-2030, the main issues list. Such a list has identified the substantive work to be carried out at future COPs. We support the inclusion of spatial planning, pollution, sustainable items to be included in item D, namely tools, guidance to support the implementation of KMGBF. China notes that COP will review progress in the implementation of the CBD and KMGBF at each of its meetings up to 2030. We believe the effectiveness of the review depends on the availability and of the comprehensiveness of the data and valid data. Considering updating the national report on a 4-year cycle, there will be no updated national reports before COP18. We hope that the Secretariat can clarify the databases for the review by COP18. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, China. Brazil, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Brazil appreciates the information made available on the document CBD-SBI-04/14. Building on discussions under Substa 25, Brazil is of the view that existing program of works and relevant tools and guidance materials provide a good basis to support the implementation of the KMGBF. Given the heavy workload in the different subsidiary bodies of the Convention and the proposed new areas of work that are under discussion, we would recommend caution regarding any decision to update existing programs of work. Regarding the annex to document CBD, Brazil understands that countries may wish to revisit the list of the main issues to be addressed at the meetings of the Conference of the Parties during the period and on the establishment of a financial mechanism under the authority and guidance of the COP. We would appreciate further clarification on some strategic issues as strategic issue A on the global review and strategic issue B on strategic actions. They seem to overlap. In line with Brazil's position during Substa 25, Brazil looks forward to having further discussions on the additional work on the 4 areas outlined under the strategic issue D, and finalizing this list in COP15. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brazil. Argentina, you have the floor, please.
Gracias. Thank you, Chair. The Argentine delegation agrees that existing programs of work and tools developed under the Convention are in general sufficient to support the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework, as noted by Brazil and other parties. In addition, we agree that aspects of capacity building and scientific and technical cooperation could be the areas which most need strengthening. Given the workload of the various subsidiary bodies under the Convention and the large amount of intersessional work to be carried out from now until COP16, Argentina recommends caution when it comes to proposing new areas of work to be included in the multi-year work program. In general, Argentina believes that the multi-year program work should be reasonable, taking into account existing resources under the Convention and the excessive workload of the subsidiary bodies, and it needs to be efficient to support the areas of the Global Biodiversity Framework which most require it. As a result, given the time constraints at this meeting, we propose that under item 11, SBI-04 takes note of the outcomes of the recommendation of Substa 26 under item 4 on scientific and technical needs to support the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. On item 12, Argentina could support most of the elements of updating the multi-year program of work. Nevertheless, we suggest that COP16 could carry out a final review of the annex when all proposals for work over the next few years are on the table. In addition, this will include the results of the work of the working group on DSI. In addition, we believe that aspects of new topics not agreed upon at SUBSA 26 should be maintained between brackets in the annex to the draft decision for consideration at COP16. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Argentina. Cuba, you have the floor, please.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Cuba welcomes the information provided by the Secretariat on these two items of the agenda. Our delegation also welcomes the outcomes of the work of the Scientific and Technical Working Group on the Convention and agrees in general with the proposal for draft recommendation to COP16. Cuba emphasizes that capacity building and development in developing countries and scientific and technical cooperation through the implementation of Decision 15.6 and 15.8 of the COP are essential to guarantee a more wide-ranging use of the tools and guidance delivered under the Convention and its protocols. In this context, we support its strengthening in the multi-year program of work for the Convention and its COP. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Cuba, for your crisp comments. I will now invite interventions from observers. I will take these in the order requested. Statements will be limited to only 2 minutes, please. If any organization is speaking on behalf of the stakeholder group, kindly say so at the beginning of your intervention. Again, I request that statements be focused on concrete suggestions. I will offer parties the opportunity to support the proposals made by observers. NGOs at 236. You have the floor, please. 236 microphone. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing to speak me on behalf of the CBD Alliance regarding our item 12. We welcome the many proposals in document SBI-04/15, including in particular the proposal to include tools and guidance to support the implementation of the GBF in the field of equity and the human rights-based approach to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity on the agenda of COP17. This is critical for the implementation of a gender-just, right-based, socially equitable approach to biodiversity conservation and sustainable use that is enshrined in the GBF. We urge the SBI to support this proposal. We support the concerns expressed during SBTA about the term bioeconomy. As demonstrated by the growing body of scientific evidence about the devastating impacts of large-scale biomass use for energy production on both biodiversity and climate itself, adding the term bio to business as usual does not always lead to outcomes that are actually biodiversity friendly, rather the contrary. Therefore, we support the recommendation of the SBTA to focus the decision on the scientific knowledge gap on if and how sustainable biodiversity-based activities, products and services can enhance biodiversity. In the conservation for the follow-up to the framework at COP18, it is important that a review of the effectiveness of measures taken to implement the GBF is undertaken. Concretely, we would request parties regard COP17 to retain proposed item D4 on equity and the human rights-based approach, to amend the following text for item D3 as follows: sustainable biodiversity-based activities, products and services that enhance biodiversity. Regarding COP18, to add G, including a review of the effectiveness of measures to implement the goals and targets of the KMGBF in line with the principles and objectives of the Convention. We welcome party support for these proposals. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. NGOs at microphone 236. I will offer parties the opportunity to support proposals made by observers. Can you speak out, please? Spell out your country name, party. Pardon? Namibia, thank you.
And Philippines.
Cotiva, Philippines.
Okay, that's enough.
Thank you. Due to paucity of time, I will take only these remaining three in the IPLCs, women and youth. Please restrict your statements to 2 minutes time limit, please. IPLCs, you have the floor at microphone 221.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of IFFB. All parties agree to Section C of the KMGBF at COP15, including to adopt a human rights-based approach in the implementation, reporting, and evaluation of KMGBF. Section C, including the human rights-based approaches, is essential for continued collective action, collaboration, and partnership among parties and all right-based holders, relevant stakeholders to achieve the goals and target of GBF. IIFB would like to call on parties to maintain the sub-bullet Roman 5, equity and human rights-based approaches relating to conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. Under the bullet point D, tools and guidance to support implementation of framework as a strategic issue for the 17th Conference of Parties. We seek parties' support. Many thanks.
Thank you, IPLCs. I will offer the parties the opportunity to support proposals made by IPLCs, please. Philippines. Can you please spell out the party name, country name? Togo. Okay? Thank you. Women at microphone 257, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the CBD Women's Caucus. We would like to express our concerns about the multi-year program of work of the Conference of the Parties because it lacks meaningful integration of monitoring, evaluation, and reporting processes on the progress of the Gender Plan of Action related to all the GBF aspects. We would like to emphasize the importance of the update and follow-up to the Gender Plan of Action and also the resource mobilization strategy. This process must be adaptive, allowing for continuous updating of both instruments. We would like to invite and express our concern of the calls for a party-led process, which seems to limit a participatory and inclusive process. We stress the need for all processes led by parties to include the full, inclusive, effective, equitable participation of women to meet with the GBF as a whole. For that, we suggest the following modifications to the document SBI-04, particularly in the section recommendations, in the annex of the list of the main issues to be addressed at the following COPs, in the column of strategic issues for 17th meeting, in the literal 4, after equity, to add gender equality, so it can read equity, gender equality, and the human rights-based approach. For the 18th meeting, in the letter C, to add an outcomes after performance, so it could read review of the operations and performance and outcomes of the GBFF and future arrangements. And for the 19th meeting, we ask the inclusion for 2 items, the follow-up to the Gender Plan of Action and the follow-up to the resource mobilization strategy. We would like the Chair to ask parties to show support for our considerations. Thank you.
Thank you, women. I offer parties the opportunity to support proposal made by women, please. Chile, Costa Rica, Morocco, Mexico. Thank you very much. DRC, Philippines, Peru. Thank you. Can you spell it, please? Central African Republic. Thank you. Okay. Youth at microphone 272. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am speaking on behalf of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, and we support the statements made by IIFP, Women Caucus, and CBD Alliance. We note the general findings regarding scientific and technical guidance to support the implementation of the GBF. Some of you might remember our closing statement from Subster 26, and thus will be no surprise that we urge you to keep the topic, equity and human rights-based approach to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, as a strategic item of the agenda of COP17. Tools and guidance on this topic are limited, as pointed out in the gap analysis in CBD/Subster 26/3 and CBD/Subster/26 INF/15. Equity, human rights, and biodiversity are inextricably linked and are central to targets 3, 13, 16, 22, and 23, and Section C, as well as to the successful implementation of the GBF as a whole. In addition to these, we also bring to your attention the importance of this topic to address intergenerational equity as a cross-cutting consideration in the implementation of the framework. Furthermore, according to the IP-based values assessment, human rights-based approaches to conservation can contribute to achieving effective and just conservation. Therefore, if that is not the case, we are missing a crucial enabling condition for conservation. We call attention that there is no other or better entity than the Convention on Biological Diversity to work on the interlinkages of equity, human rights, and biodiversity. Additionally, we support the concerns expressed during Subster about the term bioeconomy, based on the fact that without a clear definition, the bioeconomy could open up space for business to continue to use false solutions and greenwash their strategies, distancing us from the transformative change needed. Therefore, we recommend the following. Regarding COP17, to retain the proposed item D, Roman 4 on equity and the human rights-based approach to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. And also, to modify item D, Roman 3, replacing the word bioeconomy with the sentence that enhance biodiversity. Thank you, Chair. I welcome you to welcome parties to support our statement.
Thank you, youth. May I now offer parties the opportunity to support proposals made by youth? Please raise your hands. Philippines, Peru, Toga, Tonga, Cote d'Ivoire, okay. Morocco, thank you. I see no more requests for the floor. Thank you, delegates, for sharing your views. With the help of the Secretariat, I will prepare a CRP, that is conference room paper, and will bring it for consideration to a later plenary session. Distinguished delegates, this concludes our consideration of agenda item 11 and agenda item 12. Distinguished delegates, Let us now turn to agenda item 13, administrative and budgetary matters. I will first ask the Secretariat to introduce the document. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. By its decision 1534, the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity adopted an integrated program of work and budgets for the Convention and the two protocols. The Conference of the Parties approved an integrated core budget of 41.6 million for the biennium 23-2024, divided as 19.9 million for the year 2023 and 21.7 million for the year 2024. To assist parties in the preparation for COP16 on budget matters, the Executive Secretary has prepared document CBD-SBI-04/16, which provides interim administrative and financial information. The document provides information on the status of the trust funds of the Convention and its protocols in Section 2 and other financial and administrative matters in Section 3. Section 2A1 of the document deals with the income and assessed contribution for the periods of 2024. The figures reported in this section reflect the situation as at 29 February 2024. Since that date, the Secretariat has collected some $2.5 million of additional contribution and therefore updated the status of the assessed contributions. The collection rates for 2023 and 2024 now stood respectively at 93% and 32% as at 30 April 2024. The overall collection rates for the current biennium now amount to 61%. The updated contribution tables as at 30 April 2024 are available on the Secretariat's website. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat, for that introduction. Again, given the nature of this item, I do not intend to invite interventions from observers, please. I will now invite interventions from the floor. I will first take interventions on behalf of regional groups and then invite individual parties. Statements on behalf of regional groups may be up to 5 minutes, and statements by parties may be limited to 3 minutes, please. I now invite statements from parties speaking on behalf of regional groups. Namibia, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Namibia is delivering this statement on behalf of African Group. We want to express our appreciation to the Secretariat for their comprehensive work it has done in preparing this document. We recognize the crucial importance of the discussion on administrative and budgetary matters as outlined in document CBD-SBI-04/16 concerning COP decision 15/34. We thank the Secretariat for providing the tables of assessed contribution to the core budgets for the Convention and the protocols. We also express our gratitude to the countries that have made voluntary contribution to support the participation of indigenous people and local communities and the participation of parties in the Convention process. However, we are concerned about the outstanding contribution for 2022 and prior years, representing 19.60% of the total unpaid contributions. We urge all parties to promptly fulfill their financial commitments to ensure the sustainable functioning and effectiveness of the Convention and its protocol. The African Group emphasizes the importance and support for developing country parties, especially the least developed countries, small island developing states, and parties with economy in transition, fully and effectively participating in the meetings of the party to the Convention and its protocols. The African Group requests the Executive Secretary to consider the relevant decisions of the Conference of the Parties and the meetings of the party to its protocols on concurrent meetings and on improving the efficiencies of the structures and processes of the Convention and its protocol. The African Group further appreciates the actions taken by the Secretariat in developing a result-based framework, work programming, and budgeting. We urgently anticipate a framework that will guide the Secretariat in determining its resource requirements, further optimize the use of the voluntary funds to achieve results, and keep the Conference of the Parties to the Convention and the Conference of the Parties serving as meetings of the parties to the protocols, informed, and to monitor the implementation of its activities, effectively report on the results. The African Group appreciates the UN Secretariat for implementing integrated planning, management, and reporting solutions which have enhanced its agility and decentralization. We also thank UNEP for organizing training sessions on these solutions. We take note that the Secretariat of the Convention has started using the new system to manage its work program. Mr. Chairperson, the African Group strongly requests that the budget should align with Agenda Item 11 on the review of program of work of the Convention and Item 12 on the multi-year program of the COP. We further emphasize the need for an external in-depth functional review of the Secretariat structure to update its posts and grading in line with the Canning-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. The focus should be on implementation by parties as requested during COP15, and the results should be submitted for consideration and action by the COP at its 16th meeting. Africa believes that the decision made in 2022 should not be delayed by the appointment of an executive secretary who was scheduled to join sometime during 2024. In conclusion, Mr. Chairperson, we are fully committed to engaging in constructive discussions in the coming days and are resolute in effectively working together to implement the Convention and its protocol. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Namibia. Jamaica, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jamaica delivers this statement on behalf of the group of Latin America and the Caribbean. GRULAC greatly appreciates the financial support provided by developed countries to the Convention's voluntary funds that facilitate the participation of the delegates from developing countries in our meetings. This support is vital for enabling representatives from our countries to attend and contribute on crucial matters. However, our region wishes to emphasize the critical importance of these contributions in a timely manner to ensure the adequate participation of at least 2 delegates from each developing country in meetings of the subsidiary bodies and future conferences of the parties. Ensuring the presence of at least 2 delegates from each developing country is not merely a logistic necessity, but a cornerstone for meaningful and inclusive dialogue. The presence of multiple delegates allows for a richer representation of each country's perspectives, ensuring that all relevant views and expertise can be brought to the table. The GRULAC region believes that COP16 has an opportunity to make the process for appointment of future executive secretaries of the Convention more inclusive, transparent, and objective, properly involving the Conference of the Parties and its Bureau. We strongly suggest that the COP clarifies the phrase "in consultation with the Bureau," in so doing, providing an authoritative and unambiguous interpretation of the phrase in the revised administrative arrangements between the United Nations Environment Programme and the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. The COP would benefit from clarity in terms of the consultations with the Bureau that should be conducted in this regard. Some countries of our region are therefore submitting a draft decision to propose what they consider an inclusive, coherent, and transparent approach to address this important issue for consideration at COP16. GRULAC also wishes to draw attention to the delays in the preparation of documents for the SBI-04 and emphasizes the need for an in-depth analysis of the causes and solutions for the issue. Timely preparation and distribution of documents are crucial for the effective functioning of our meetings, and these delays have significant implications for the decision-making process, especially for developing countries. Therefore, GRULAC underscores the importance of identifying and addressing the root causes of these delays to prevent their recurrence. GRULAC agrees on the need for the Executive Secretary to undertake an independent, in-depth functional review of the structure of the Secretariat with a view to updating its structure and post in the light of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework requested by COP Decision 15/34, paragraph 35. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jamaica. I see no requests from parties who wish to speak on behalf of regional groups. If any party is there, please, I see Brazil would like to speak on.
We're now going to parties.
Yeah, we are moving on to parties if no party is there to speak on behalf of regional groups. Okay? Okay, thank you. Sweden, you have the floor, please.
Dear Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, document CBD-SBI-04/16 provides an update on received contributions to the trust funds to facilitate participation of parties and IPLCs for the period 2023 to 2024. The document also makes it clear that additional resources are needed to facilitate participation in the coming meetings, now to COP16. During this meeting, we have also frequently heard about the need for full and effective participation in CBD meetings. Mr. Chair, I'm therefore very happy to announce that the Swedish Ministry of Climate and Enterprise is preparing a contribution in Swedish crowns that amounts to approximately $350,000 for participation of developing country parties and for participation of indigenous peoples and local communities in the work of the convention processes during 2024. The amount should be divided between the two trust funds. Sweden hopes that this contribution will ensure broader participation in the process leading up to COP16. We truly believe that all of government and all of society approach is necessary to implement the global biodiversity framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Sweden. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to give floor to Brazil to speak on behalf of a group. Therefore, the party would get 5 minutes, please. Brazil, you have the floor.
Honorable Chairman, distinguished delegates, I have the honor to take the floor on behalf of Antigua and Barbuda, Argentina, Bahamas, Chile, Colombia, Guatemala, Mexico, Peru, Uruguay, St. Lucia, Suriname, Venezuela, and my own country, Brazil. Our delegations strongly believe that there is significant room for improvement in enhancing the transparency, inclusivity, and objectivity in the process for appointing future executive secretaries. This agenda item presents a crucial opportunity to build upon previous COP decisions and make substantial progress in this regard. The revised administrative arrangements between UNEP and the Secretariat of CBD, contained in Annex 1 of this COP Decision 10/45, stipulates that the Executive Secretary is appointed by the UN Secretary-General as recommended by the Executive Director of UNEP in consultation with the Conference of the Parties through its Bureau. The Conference of the Parties is master of its own procedure. It can therefore adopt a decision clarifying what it understands as being consulted through its Bureau. The COP can provide an authoritative interpretation of this phrase in the administrative agreements that relates to itself. To this end, our delegations have put forward a draft decision for consideration of all parties. It aims at identifying the actions that would need to be taken by the COP to consider that it has been properly consulted by the UNEP Executive Director through its Bureau. We drafted this proposal because we are firmly convinced that all stakeholders would greatly benefit from increased clarity in this process. We circulated it to serve as a basis for a constructive and forward-looking dialogue aiming to foster a more transparent, inclusive, and objective procedure for the appointment of future executive secretaries. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Brazil. Now I would like to move on to individual parties, please, who will get 3 minutes time limit. Costa Rica, you have the floor, please.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. On item 13 of the agenda, our delegation would like to very briefly refer to the statements made by the distinguished colleagues from Brazil on behalf of a group of countries. First of all, I'd like to express that Costa Rica agrees that there is sufficient space to improve transparency and objectivity of the process to appoint future executive secretaries. In particular, when it comes to timeframes for parties to express opinions through the Bureau on terms of reference and the submission of recommendations. In addition, I would like to highlight that not just Decision 1045 of the Conference of the Parties, but also Decision 7/34 are important. In both decisions, Chair, it's crystal clear that the role of the Bureau in appointing the Secretary is of an advisory nature. Therefore, Costa Rica is not in position to support a resolution on this aspect, which would modify the advisory role of the Bureau and, as a result, modify the authority of the Secretary General in the appointment of the Executive Secretary. On the one hand, we believe that a clarifying resolution, as proposed, is not the appropriate legal mechanism to move this topic forwards. On the other hand, the implications of such a resolution go beyond the Convention on Biological Diversity, with potential impacts on the work of the other 2 Rio Conventions, and in particular on the programs and funds of the United Nations under the authority of the Secretary General. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Costa Rica. Belgium, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Belgium would like to thank the Secretariat for the information provided, but we would like to draw attention to a few issues highlighted in the information note of the Secretariat. The Secretariat notes in its report that travel expenses will be overrun significantly. In the latest available OIS audit report from 2019, there were already recommendations made related to travel. We would like to see clarification from the Secretariat on how the situation has evolved since, including with regards to a mechanism to demonstrate the effectiveness of measures taken to rationalize the use of travel resources. And in any case, the Secretariat should prioritize official travel that is directly related to the implementation of the approved work programs. 10. The requested functional review of the structure of the Secretariat with a view to updating its structures and posts in light of the Kunming GBF has not been undertaken so far. There was a significant amount foreseen for this activity in the budget 2023-2024. At the previous COP, the Secretariat expressed a need for a significant amount of staff resources, and in the end, the COP approved only 4 additional staff members. We think in light of that conversation on human resources, undertaking this functional review is important to inform the Budget Committee at COP16 and also the Conference of the Parties. We would like to seek clarification from the Secretariat on the current state of play with regards to this review. And in particular, we would like to inquire whether it will be completed and information timely available for its discussion at our 16th meeting, given its importance for decision-making on budgetary matters. Finally, we would like to stress that the timely analysis of the budget needs is important for the Budget Committee to take decisions on the budget for the next biennium, especially in light of requests for additional tasks put forward to the Secretariat. We urge the Secretariat to provide the scenarios and budget documents well on time before COP16, and they should include information on the administrative and budgetary implications of the draft decisions in accordance with Rule 14 of the Rules of Procedure. We are of the view that it would be useful if the Secretariat organizes virtual, inclusive, and interactive meetings ahead of COP16 to respond to questions and comments by parties on administrative and budgetary matters on the basis of relevant documentation. And then Belgium shares the view there is a need to clarify the process related to the appointment of the Executive Secretary, and there is a need for further reflection about this issue. We have developed a proposal to reflect these requests to the Secretariat in a draft recommendation, and will submit this in writing. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Belgium. European Union, would you like to speak on behalf of a regional group? European Union, would you like to speak on behalf of a regional group?
No, thank you. I speak on behalf of the European Union.
Okay, you have the floor, please.
Thank you. I would like to support the statement just made by my Belgian colleague. And we would like to underline the usefulness of if the Secretariat organizes virtual meetings ahead of COP16 to prepare for the budget negotiations. This has been done for some CBD COPs in the past, and it's also common for several other conventions and MEAs. For example, the UNCCD Secretariat organized 2 online consultations on 13th March and the 22nd of May, respectively. And for each of them, the UNCCD provided budgetary information, explaining notably the inflation rate, staffing, savings, and the potential availability of voluntary contributions. Documents prepared for such virtual meetings could be updated thereafter, though final documents must, of course, be available in a timely manner in full respect of the rules of procedure. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, European Union. Burkina Faso, you have the floor, please.
Thank you so much, sir. Burkina Faso backs the statement made by the Africa Group as delivered by Namibia. Burkina Faso recognizes the importance of this topic regarding budgetary and administrative questions for the functioning and operation of the Secretariat and the implementation of the Convention through the meetings and the improvement of the effectiveness of the structures and processes of the Convention and its protocols. Faced with the concern of the African Group regarding the low collection rates, Burkina Faso stands ready to make its contribution to ensure the sustainable functioning of the Convention and its protocols. Indeed, a committee was formally set up to assess the situation and to assist the government in the management and follow-up of contributions under the various conventions and international instruments, including the Convention on Biodiversity and all of its protocols. Furthermore, Burkina Faso recalls the importance of support for developing states for effective participation of all parties in all meetings of the party to the Convention and its protocols. Therefore, we encourage the Secretariat to determine its resource requirements by taking into account all the parties who are working to ensure the success of the Convention and its protocol. Burkina Faso also takes note of the fact that the Secretariat of the Convention has started using the new systems to manage its program of work. It is therefore important to preserve achievements reached thus far, as well as the efforts of the Secretariat to ensure that we have a results-based management culture. We wish to align ourselves with the statement made by Namibia on behalf of the Africa Group and would like to see the budget adjusted to reflect Agenda Item 11 regarding the consideration of the work of the conventions, as well as Agenda Item 12 regarding the multi-year program of work. In the two documents, CBD-SBI-04/16, regarding the special trust funds under the convention and its protocols, in the part regarding the budget of the convention, of the BAL Convention and its protocols, there is a need to look at the fact as the total amount owed and the collection rates are indicated. However, what is not indicated is anything about the difficulties that some parties experience when they are to make their contributions. For this reason, there is a need to look at collection rate mechanisms to see if there might be a need to update them. Burkina Faso stands ready to work to this end. Thank you.
Thank you, Burkina Faso. United Kingdom, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. We'd like to thank the Secretariat for their note on administrative and budgetary matters. This provides a helpful update on the current status of the trust funds and expenditure for the biennium. We note that a number of the requests for the Executive Secretary contained in Decision 15/34 have not been carried out, and we request that they are completed as soon as possible, so that COP16 is able to adopt a reasonable budget for the next biennium based on sound information. In particular, the request for the Executive Secretary to undertake an external, in-depth functional review of the structure of the Secretariat with a view to updating its structure and posts in the light of the KMGBF is a priority. This, alongside a review of the programmes of work and consideration of new work areas, will be needed to ensure we are able to align the future workload of the Secretariat with the resources available. The request to the Executive Secretariat to take follow-up action with parties that have still not paid their contributions, together with UNEP and the President of the COP, is also a priority. A well-functioning Secretariat is the responsibility of us all. We note there are areas of underspend and potential overspend in the core budget for the biennium. We look forward to receiving additional information about these areas, along with the results-based budgeting, a new programme monitoring tool in the documentation for consultation at COP16. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom. Benin, you have the floor, please.
Merci.
Thank you, sir. Benin firmly supports Namibia's statement made on behalf of Africa. We would like to convey our gratitude to the Secretariat for their hard work. Hard work in drawing up this very important document, which for us serves as a summary of all of the achievements and constraints since 2023. It is clear that the objectives of the Global Biodiversity Framework cannot be achieved without substantial resources mobilized in a timely manner, and Benin welcomes the Secretariat's leadership in mobilizing funds and managing them through the adoption and use of the most proven tools. We consider document CBD-SBI-04/16, drawn up in accordance with Decision 15/34, to be tangible proof of Benin's support and adoption. We thank all the country parties that have been able to meet their contribution commitments, and we indeed encourage them to continue their efforts. As analyzed in point 10 of the agenda on the long-term strategic approach to integration, or to mainstreaming rather, enormous resources are needed to deal with the complexity of all the factors that determine biodiversity. But these days, in addition to natural disasters of all kinds and stripes, we are and will be increasingly confronted with political, social, economic, and above all, security challenges that are fraught with the risk of making us doubt the priority of biodiversity and the respect of our commitments to the implementation of the GBF. So, while welcoming the collection rate for the year 2023, Benin is concerned about the low collection rate for the current year, which is a year dedicated to the 16th Conference of the Parties. And Belcom welcomes the follow-up actions carried out by the Secretariat for Collections in cooperation with the United Nations Programme and the President of the Conference of the Parties in accordance with the provisions of Decision 16/34. However, while encouraging and supporting the continuation of reminders and follow-up, Benin would like specific studies to be carried out to better identify the reasons for the low collection rates in order to put in place long-term operational strategies for the collection of parties' contributions, in addition to the provisions of paragraph 24, Decision 15/34. Your Excellency, in accordance with paragraph 1 of the annex to Decision 9/34, the procedure for the allocation of funds must aim for the full and active participation of poor countries and states in order to enhance the legitimacy of the Convention's decisions and encourage its application at local, national, regional, and international levels. In view of the great complexity and the multidisciplinarity of the topics and items on the agenda, the participation of a single party delegate in the official negotiations of the Convention and its protocols would be very restrictive and run counter to the spirit of Decision 9/34, which calls for legitimacy of decisions and their implementation at all levels of decision-making. To this end, Benin believes that it is necessary to include in budgets and programs the support of at least 2 participants from least developed states and small island developing states, as well as parties from economies in transition at official meetings of the Convention and its protocols. We do understand that this might be more expensive. By way of conclusion, sir, Benin notes with satisfaction the document CBD-SBI-04/16 contains a very good quantitative and qualitative map of administrative and budgetary questions. However, Benin would like the 3 main points analyzed in the document, namely 1, introduction to status of trust funds under the Convention and its protocols, and 3 other topics. As I said, 3 other topics be completed by a very important point 4, which would be entitled Recommendations. This 4th item will focus mainly on measures taken by the Secretariat to further reduce the environmental impact of its activities in accordance with paragraph 13 of Decision 15/34, lessons learned from resource mobilization management procedures and the establishment of various Secretariat posts, the challenges of supporting the participation of delegates from poor states in the official meetings of the Convention and its protocols. We are fully committed to making our contribution to the implementation of the Convention and its protocols, and we already offer our congratulations to the newly selected Secretary, to whom we wish every possible success in continuing the fight for the conservation of biological diversity. I thank you, sir. I thank all of you present here. Thank you.
Thank you, Benin. Uganda, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. Uganda aligns itself with the position of Africa presented by Namibia on this specific subject, and we would like to appreciate the Secretariat for the note prepared. We equally recommend the implementation of decision on integrated program of work and budget for the Convention and attendant protocols. However, we are of the view that preliminary assessment could be done to see purposes of efficiency and effectiveness for purposes of furthering administration moving forward. We also call upon full operationalization of the results-based framework, which we have noted that is not yet fully operational. You will recall, pursuant to Decision 1534, the Conference of Parties adopted a staffing table of 53 posts in professional category and 29 posts in general service category. However, we also are concerned that actually this has not been done. So we recommend that this conclusive filling of vacant positions is done to ensure that actually operations are done successfully. Pursuant to Decision 1534, the Conference of Parties urged that those who had not paid contributions for the budgets for 22 and also prior years do so without delay or conditionalities. We recall the Executive Secretary was requested to follow up. So we expect to have a report and actually a conclusive strategy on how we can have this done. In light with Decision 1534, we're also concerned with the delay of non-performance of the in-depth functional review of the structure of the Secretariat. This will affect performance and operations of the Secretariat in general, who are currently understaffed. And it is very important that this is done immediately to ensure that actually the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework is implemented, noting that already the budget core item was planned for. We also move to propose that the multi-year program of work, as well as the program of work proposed, be reviewed in view of proposing tenable budgetary reforms to ensure that everything is done according to budget, not limiting performance of other activities moving forward. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, we call for improved administrative synergies for possible creation of relevant strategies, if need be, regional nodes and related implementation aspects, focusing on budgetary issues, staff capacity building, and synergies to ensure full implementation of the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Uganda. The parties in line are QR, Canada, Japan, Norway, Egypt, Russian Federation. Canada, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Canada would firstly like to thank the Secretariat for its extremely hard work in fulfilling its main objective, to arrange for and service meetings of the Convention and prepare reports on the execution of its functions. We are very conscious that the KMGBF is extremely ambitious and that the tasks we have at hand are also many. There is not enough time in a day to get everything done, and we are clearly overtaxing our Secretariat, who do not have enough time and resources to do what we would like it to do. As parties, it is our responsibility to help solve this problem by providing guidance on priority setting, where to focus resources and where to adjust. We can't simply ask for everyone to do more. This is more than honey. It is about how we can ensure that we keep the beehive healthy, well-organized, and productive. It is our view that there are two elements that should guide how to prioritize the tasks of the Secretariat and its Executive Secretary: decisions made by parties and the strategic plan, the KMGBF, that we all so celebrated at COP15. In this regard, we echo the statement made by Namibia on behalf of the African region that the Secretariat's budget and organization should be made to align with the KMGBF. However, we are currently seeing how specific requests from 196 parties are left incomplete, how documents are not ready for meetings, all the while other activities are taken on and even more are being suggested. We need to focus and prioritize. Under this agenda item, we would like to see a clear commitment from all of us as parties that we will enable our Secretariat to focus on delivering on the decisions we made at COP15, including those made regarding administrative and budgetary matters which have not been concluded. This includes, but is not limited to, the undertaking of an external in-depth functional review of the structure of the Secretariat, which has been mentioned here today by many parties. And like our colleagues from the UK, we are eager to get updates on these tasks, but also think it would be important to develop a short SBI-04 recommendation from parties to properly communicate the priority that we assign to these tasks. Again, we are extremely sympathetic to the pressure that we have placed on our Secretariat, and we firmly believe that status quo is not an option. As parties, we need to do a better job at taking clear decisions, but when we do, those decisions need to be respected. We look forward to seeing further work from the Secretariat on these pending items ahead of COP16. We will be providing a draft recommendation text in writing that reflects these points that we have made for consideration of parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. Japan, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Japan would like to take this opportunity to thank the Secretariat for preparing the meeting documents and for their hard work and dedication. On administrative and budgetary matters, Japan believes that cost effectiveness should be pursued to keep the level of the Secretariat budget. Facing with multiple tasks, it would be crucial to prioritize works on a scrap and build basis. Based on Decision 15/34, the Executive Secretary was to undertake an external in-depth functional review of the structure of the Secretariat with a view to updating its structure and posts in light of KMGBF. However, the review has not yet been undertaken. Japan would like to request the Secretariat to undertake the review appropriately by taking into account the results-based budgeting framework and related information contained in the document CBD/COP/15/7 at 1, as well as the recommendations of OIOS audit report as appropriate before COP16, so that the Secretariat would be better managed to fulfill the mandates from the COP. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Japan. Norway, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Secretariat needs resources to handle the increased workload created by our own KMGBF. Norway's position is that we are ready to increase the core budget and that we encourage other delegations to consider this as well. At the same time, the Secretariat should perform a review so that it can organize the work in an efficient manner, as stated by Japan. On the proposal made by Brazil and other countries on procedures on appointment of the future executive secretaries, we should support the statement made by Costa Rica. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Norway. Egypt, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Egypt would like to join all the previous participants or speakers that they thanked the Secretariat for the excellent work dealing with all of the package that came out of the Global Biodiversity Framework, particularly those related to the budget as well. Secondly, Egypt support statement given by Namibia on behalf of Africa, as well as Burkina Faso, Benin, and Uganda as well. And we hope that the budget issue during COP16 will enable us not only to increase the number of staff of the Secretariat, because we need more people, but at the same time to allow developing countries to participate in a more efficient way rather than only one delegate. Regarding the issue of our colleague from Russia, from Brazil, on the appointment of the Secretary General, Executive Secretary, we, in principle, we support it by all means. However, we have to take into consideration that the last decision regarding this issue was taken almost 14 years ago. And many things happened during this time. And it is not only about the appointment of Executive Secretary, but we are very keen to look at it at policy level. That means the Bureau role, very clear role in terms of procedural and substantive issues as well. We need to understand what does it mean consultation to start with. It is not only just we talk to each other and that's it. No, we have to be involved in the whole process in a way that we can contribute significantly to keep the Secretariat, CBD Secretariat, improving, at the same time have this what we call institutional reform in a way that they have all the institutional memory that help all of us to continue the good work that we have started almost 30 years ago. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Egypt. Russian Federation, you have the floor, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chair. Now, at the outset, we wish to fully associate ourselves with a statement made by Canada regarding our work, the work of the Secretariat, and our priorities. We wish to convey our gratitude to the Secretariat for the submitted report on their activities and the status of trust funds under the Convention and information on the in-depth operational review, although we agree with other countries that it now needs to be concluded. We take note and will use the information in our discussion of administrative, organizational and budgetary questions during COP16. Regarding budgetary matters, we would like to note and draw the Secretariat's attention to the importance, indeed the necessity, of work with UNEP on the timely sending out of invoices for contributions to be paid to the CBD. We haven't received it thus far, and this is perhaps what answers the question raised by Namibia on behalf of Africa regarding eliminating arrears and timely payment of contributions. And we would ask you to reflect this in the report of our meeting. Sir, the Russian Federation wishes to thank the delegations of a number of states for the joint submission of the new draft decision on clarifying and adding more transparency to the procedure of future appointments, such as appointment of the Executive Secretary of the Convention. This was contained in the statement made by Brazil. We stand ready to continue productive work on the text of this draft decision to ensure that we're in a position to adopt it at COP16. We view this initiative as a useful one and will serve in the future to enhance transparency and openness in decision-making. We base ourselves on the fact that in case this decision is adopted, it will be, or would also apply to future processes and procedures regarding the appointment of the next executive directors of the organization. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Russian Federation. We have the following parties in queue, and I will not be taking any more requests for the floor. I'll speak out. The parties in the queue are Democratic Republic of Congo, Spain, China, Kenya, Indonesia, New Zealand, if time permits, we may take Switzerland and Austria, that too without interpretation, please. Democratic Republic of Congo, you have the floor, please.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. The Democratic Republic of the Congo reiterates the statements made by Namibia on behalf of the African Group. DRC welcomes the work carried out by the Secretariat and the Executive Secretary in providing updated information on administrative and budgetary matters. The DRC also congratulates the Secretariat for the work carried out, but recalls that the Secretariat should do more to mobilize more financing for the functioning of the convention and the participation of at least 2 delegates for each meeting as scheduled under the convention's protocols. The DRC notes the appointment of Ms. Schumacher as the post of Executive Secretary on 2nd of April 2024. However, the DRC remains concerned by the level of transparency during the appointment process. The DRC recalls the decisions 1045 and 834 of the COP and asks for improvements to be made in future to increase inclusivity and transparency. Therefore, the DRC supports the statements made by Brazil and remains available to contributing to exchanges along these lines. The DRC insists upon the fact that we need to have the participation of indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth. This needs to be ensured in a fair manner. DRC congratulates countries who have paid their contributions and encourages other countries, developed countries, to do so, such as Switzerland, Belgium, France, Canada and other countries who have contributed to improving the involvement of developing country parties. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For Democratic Republic of Congo, I also request all the parties to be as brief as possible so that all would get an opportunity. Spain, you have the floor, please.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. Spain expresses concern because we haven't completed up to date the review of external functioning and structuring of the Secretariat in order to update its structure and posts in the light of the Global Biodiversity Framework. This was requested at COP15. We highlight the external character of this review, and we would like the Secretariat to explain what stage it is for this process and what it's doing to ensure that this is completed in time for adequate decision-making during COP16. We would like to also highlight the importance of all documents and information on budgetary matters being submitted in line with the rules of procedure of the Convention. In this regard, and to improve effectiveness and efficiency of the Convention and its processes, we would like the Secretariat to organize at least one virtual meeting to present and explain the budgetary proposals of the Convention prior to COP16. In this way, the parties can ask questions and the Secretariat will be able to update documents, taking into account information requested by parties. In addition, we believe it's important for all parties to be made aware of budgetary implications of the various requests made in each of the substantive matters. The Secretariat should inform before the opening of each substantive items of the agenda of these costs. Only acting responsibly and in an informed manner can we improve the operations and efficiencies of decisions adopted on the Convention together. Therefore, we support the statements made by Belgium as a whole and its proposal for the subsidiary body to draft a recommendation on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Spain. China, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Discussions on administrative and budgetary matters are crucial. China thanks the Secretariat for the documents prepared. Since 2019, China has been the largest contributor to the core budget and its protocols. We welcome Secretariat's efforts in developing and implementing a result-based framework and strengthening budgetary management. We hope the Secretariat can continue to optimize fund use and management based on the monitoring outcomes. China notes that March this year, Secretariat hosted a training on integrated planning, management, and reporting solutions. We applaud that China urges that countries that have not yet paid their contributions for the year 2022 and before to do so soon to ensure normal operations. We appeal the Secretary to increase support to developing countries as appropriate to ensure their participation and that their capacity can cover parallel discussions. Thank you again, Chair.
Thank you, China. Kenya, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Kenya aligns with the statement read by Namibia on behalf of Africa on administrative and budgetary matters. Kenya also recognizes the importance of discussions on administrative and budgetary matters as outlined in document CBD-Live/416 concerning decision 1534, and thanks the Secretariat for providing the table on overall status for assessed contributions to the core budgets for the Convention and protocols. Kenya also appreciates the countries that have made voluntary contributions to support participation of indigenous people and local communities and participation of parties in convention process. In addition, Kenya applauds parties which have been able to directly support or sponsor professionals and experts support the Secretariat in implementation of the program of work. However, Kenya requests that all vacant positions are filled in accordance with paragraph 8 of decision 15/34 of COP of parties for better implementation. Kenya again emphasizes the need for the Executive Secretary to undertake an external and in-depth function review of the structure of the Secretariat with a view of updating its structures and posts in light of KMGBF for consideration by Conference of Parties at its 16th meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. Indonesia, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving Indonesia the floor. On this Agenda 13, Indonesia would like to convey 3 points. First, like many others, Indonesia appreciates the Secretariat for the report and for its hard work. Second, we consider the concern of GRULAC and on the need to enhance more funding to assist more involvement and participation of parties, in particular developing countries and especially LDCs, has true merit. To support more inclusivity with parties' engagement, especially in the decision-making process. We look forward to discussing further on this matter. And finally, third, regarding Brazil's statement on behalf of 13 GRULAC parties on the need to have a COP decision to clarify on what constitute consultations of the Executive Director of UNEP with the COP through its Bureau on the appointment of the CBD Executive Secretary. Indonesia also considers these proposals to also having true merit, as it has been also supported by Egypt, Russia, and other colleagues. Indonesia strongly supports consistent and continuous effort to further improvement and enhancement of transparency, inclusivity, and objectivity for all CBD decisions and processes, including on the appointment of the future CBD Executive Secretaries. We believe this effort is in line with what has also been conducted by other conventions and other international organizations. In this regard, this is also in line with Indonesia's position on the hybrid meeting draft COP decision, where Indonesia also proposed draft text proposals aiming to clarify and elaborate on what constitute consultation of Bureau members with parties, in this regard with the regional constituents. For us, positive governance reforms is always good. Indonesia looks forward to a very positive discussion with colleagues on this matter, and since in general this is a positive proposal, hopefully to adopt it in the next COP16. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. New Zealand, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We congratulate and thank the Secretariat on the production of a huge volume of outputs to support our work. However, we do agree with the comments made by Canada earlier. We simply can't keep adding to the workload of the Secretariat without considering the implications of adding to, but almost never deleting from, our program of work. In this regard, we echo comments regarding the necessity of receiving timely advice from the Secretariat on the program and budgetary implications of our decisions in accordance with Rule 14 of the Rules of Procedure. This is an important discipline in responsible intergovernmental decision-making regarding our program of work. We would welcome clarification from the Secretariat as to why this is not being routinely provided. As we noted in our statement under item 8, we also share the concern that the functional review requested in COP Decision 1534, paragraph 35 has not been carried out. This will be an important tool in realigning the work of the Secretariat to the KMGBF, as well as modernising and improving its efficiency. We expect that this review will be completed as soon as possible. Finally, the procedure for the appointment of regarding the procedure for the appointment of the Executive Secretary, we agree that there are potential improvements to be made in the process. However, we agree with the points raised by Costa Rica that we should be very cautious in how we proceed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, New Zealand. Switzerland, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief and speak in English so that if the translator will run away, then most of the colleagues can understand my English. Switzerland aligns itself with the statement made by Canada and just before me by New Zealand. We agree that the absolute priority of the Secretariat must be the preparation of the meetings of the parties. At the same time, we invite parties to be reluctant in asking more and more additional work to be done by the Secretariat. With regard to the budget, we consider important that all decisions include an estimate of the costs, as just mentioned by New Zealand. Finally, we share the concern expressed by several delegations that the process for the selection of the new Executive Secretary lacked transparency and involvement by the parties. We will engage in the discussion on how to improve the procedure and relevant guidelines. At the same time, as Costa Rica, we want to flag that this selection process are sensitive by nature, and not all information can be shared with the large public or with all delegations. And we have to be aware of the risk of politicization of a selection process if there is a large involvement by parties. And this, I think, we have to avoid, and I'm pretty sure that is the reason why at the end it is the Secretary General of the UN who decides. This makes sense in our view. Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. Austria, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Austria would like to emphasize in the context of this agenda item the following points. Firstly, we urge the Secretariat to prepare the documents on budget in time before the COPs, the COP16. This means 19 days before the meeting, to allow parties to do the analysis of the documents and to prepare for the negotiations on the next biennium budget. We support the request from Belgium and others that information on administrative and budgetary implications of the draft decisions should be provided in the documentation of the respective agenda items of the COP. This would contribute to transparency of our discussion, help us in our preparations, and also contribute to time management in the Budget Committee at the COP. Secondly, we are greatly concerned, as many other colleagues, that the functional review of the Secretariat, as decided by the COP, has not been carried out by the Secretariat. The document in front of us does not give further information why there is the delay of this review. We request this information from the Secretariat at this meeting. We support the proposal from Belgium to prepare a recommendation on this issue as well. Finally, we strongly support the Belgium statement on behalf of the EU and its member states as regards the urgent need for further clarification on the process of appointment of future executive secretaries of the CBD to ensure full transparency of the process and fully respect the role of the COP via its bureau in this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Austria. Last speaker, European Union, please. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. And as Austria just pointed out, thank you, Mr. Chair, for letting me come back in. I would like to clarify so that it's clear for everybody that the last part of our statement with regards to the need to clarify the process related to the appointment of the Executive Secretary was made on behalf of the EU and its member states. Thank you very much.
Thank you, European Union. I see no more requests for the floor. Thank you, delegates, for sharing your views. With the help of Secretariat, I will prepare a CRP, conference room paper, and will bring it for consideration to a later plenary session. This is based on the submission made by the parties, please. Distinguished delegates, this concludes our consideration of this item. But before adjourning, I would like to state and share with you that many parties have sought some clarifications from the Secretariat. So I request the Secretariat to please give clarification at the beginning of the plenary tomorrow. So that is a request to the Secretariat. This concludes our consideration of this item. We have also reached the end of our meeting for today. Thank you for your kind cooperation and understanding. We will reconvene tomorrow when we will, that is Monday, when we will turn to the consideration of conference room papers. The meeting is now adjourned, please. Have a good lunch.